technical points of contact, and a variety of other things that are specific to individual companies or individual efforts will be separate conversations from today. Number 3, please utilize the Q&A portion of the Zoom chat here. There is a chat window, and then there is a Q&A. So please direct questions to that Q&A. Our team, which is here supporting the event, will help us not only tee questions up for us to answer live, but they'll actually be answering probably most of your questions there in the Q&A function itself, which is fantastic. And then if we happen to have any other AFWERX or AFVentures folks in the crowd that we have not promoted to panelists, if you'll raise your hand, and our team will take care of that. All right, next slide, please. All right, so some critical points of contact, POCs for you guys to know. Again, my name is Jared Evans as the early stage investment lead. We, as I kind of described briefly before, we are responsible for the phase 1 down select, phase 1 execution, as well as phase 2 down select, right? Which is of particular interest here with this direct to phase 2 effort. Once those phase 2 contracts are awarded, we hand those efforts off to our phase 2 operations, transitions, and execution team, namely Ray Kahn and Adam Sheridan. Our solicitation officers for this particular solicitation is Ms. Christina Croak and Mr. James Helmick. So you'll see their names floating around, obviously, on the document itself, as well as in communications if and when that's needed. And then from our AFVentures engagements team that help facilitates events like this and many others, we have Mr. Jimmy Colrain and Helena Krusek as well. All right, so we'll move forward. We're going to be talking a lot about specifics for this particular solicitation, but in general, there are a ton of other resources available, not only for AFVentures programs, but also for the other different aspects of AFWERX, right? So the other divisions, whether that be Spark and all the incredible capability they bring, whether it be the Prime divisions with Agility Prime and now Orbital Prime as well, and a lot of the sister organizations and functions of AFVentures. Just want you to know that is out there and is a great resource for general questions and inquiries into who AFWERX is and what we do. All right. With that, we're going to start kind of talking about the SIBR and SITR program specifically, and why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, right? Long story short is there are lots, thousands even, probably tens of thousands of commercially viable companies that have not worked with us, right? Have not worked with the Department of the Air Force, have not explored the government as a business partner, has not brought their capability to our customer base, our market. You know, for us, we want to make sure that everyone who has the wherewithal or has the potential to come and take advantage of these programs have that ability, right? So we have events like this to really distribute that information as widely as possible, and to make sure that you all, as the commercial sector, as the private sector, as academia and industry in general, know that there are programs where you can come directly to us without us having to ask for you, right? And work not only with the AFWERX team, but work with the greater Air Force, work with the greater Space Force, and really not only use these programs to your economic benefit, but also increase the robustness of our national security as a whole as well. Next slide, please. All right, so as we kind of work forward and think about how we do that, right? How do we lower barriers to entry and make ourselves the best business partner possible, right? We need speed and intensity are really important pieces of this equation, right? We have to move at the speed of relevance. We have to move at the speed of business. We have to be business partners. That means not being, thinking of ourselves as, as being kind of in an ivory tower, but really working with companies to develop capability that makes sense for them as a company, makes sense for their trajectory as they scale, develop and scale their concepts, but also as we move forward and help grow companies. And in very simple terms, think about our relationship with industry as a partnership, right? Thinking of ourselves as someone who brings value to the relationship, as opposed to just giving money and expecting people to work for us, right? It's a very different kind of perspective on things, but it's something that our AFVentures team in particular is spectacular at, and is really what we're driving throughout the Air Force and the federal government. Over. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so when it comes to these programs, we're really focused on transition, right? And that's an easy thing to say, but what does that really mean, right? In order to be successful in this space, not only do we have to have two different partners, neither of which is AFVentures, by the way, but we have two different partners who want to work together. Not only do they want to work together, but they have an incentive structure that facilitates capability moving from the development space into what we call the operational space in the government, right? And how we do that, it really is through our open topic. So we're going to start kind of funneling down to specifically what we're offering here in the spring cycle through our open topic SBIR and STTR programs. And this direct to phase 2 is an open topic. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that, any small business in any technology space can come to us through this program and secure contracts with AFVentures specifically, and start to work with our operational force in developing their solution for that Air Force application. The difference in this direct to phase 2 that we'll get into a little bit is that this is kind of an express lane, right? This is a way for people who already have buy-in from the Department of the Air Force to jump straight into prototyping opportunities with those organizations. And we'll talk more about that. But the open topic remains in place for this direct to phase 2. So again, any technology, any qualifying small business can come through and take advantage of this direct to phase 2 opportunity. All right, we'll go to the next slide here. Just to clarify, right? So in previous cycles, we have offered all three of these programs with STTR phase 1s, SBIR phase 1s, as well as the direct to phase 2. As we've discussed a bit up to this point, what we're going to be offering this round is this SBIR direct to phase 2 specifically. Not only is that allows us to focus and get them really award more contracts in this area, but allows us to do it quickly, right? And be responsive to your needs as industry. So we're excited to be able to do that. One highlight here is that for those who've been around, you're familiar with our phase 2s being $750K as a maximum program value. We have upped that substantially to $1.25 million as being the maximum programmatic cost of this opportunity. So what that means is you can bring additional funds from other places, venture capital, private investment, commercial investment, et cetera. Your government organizations who are supporting you can also bring funding, right, to add to this 1.25. But the programmatic cost, we can only use a maximum of $1.25 million of SBIR funding for each of these efforts. So with that, we'll move to the next slide and start to talk about some of the specifics of this direct to phase 2. All right, let's go to the next slide. Perfect. All right, so this is really the meat of direct to phase 2, right? This is what distinguishes it specifically from our traditional phase 1 opportunities, right? We won't talk through all of the words on the slide. There's a lot going on here. You can take a look at the source there for the full effect and kind of read through the entirety of the relevant documentation here. But we highlighted a few things that are just really supremely important. So for this direct to phase 2, offerers must adequately document completion of the phase 1 feasibility requirement, right? So what that means is you have to demonstrate to us via your proposal that your solution, right, your product or offering is feasible to be implemented, to be integrated with our operations, right? A key portion of that is a signed customer memorandum from a Department of the Air Force organization that tells us that to a certain degree, right? It says, hey, this solution, this company is relevant to what we're doing and can positively impact our operations. But there's more that goes into it than just that, right? We want to understand your commercialization potential. We're able to understand the full breadth of your defense need. And we're also going to talk about the technical merit and your technical approach to integrating into those operations, right? So we're going to look for your knowledge of the marketplace. We're going to look for your commercialization plan and integration strategy into our operations, right? As we go through and evaluate these. One thing to note is that this Direct to Phase 2 is open to anyone. It's a public solicitation, right? That includes companies who have previously taken or previously executed a Phase 1 through our program, but maybe didn't transition to a Phase 2. That being said, the feasibility documentation must not be solely work performed under a previous SBIR or SITR contract, right? So we want to see that you have taken maybe that core of work and expounded on that in the meantime, if you will, right? So that's something to keep in mind as we move forward. So that you can't simply take your previous Phase 1 work and just plug it in here, right? We need to add to that per the regulatory guidance here. All right, let's go to the next slide. Perfect. All right, so for folks who are familiar with the SBIR and SITR program, this is going to look very familiar, but it's really important information to get out, right? So as you go through and start to look at your proposal or consider your proposal, first you have to make sure that it's submitted via DSIP, and we'll talk through that in just a moment. But all the proposals are going to be structured like this, right? Volume 1 through Volume 6. Volume 2 is going to be your technical, your proposal, right? Your technical volume. That's really the heart of your proposal from a work plan standpoint. For this effort, it's a white paper with a maximum of 15 pages. That doesn't include title pages and glossaries and that kind of thing. But it talks through the high points of your offering, what you're doing and how you're doing it. In Volume 3, you're going to talk through some of the costs. That is a system formatted input. So you're going to have to kind of take your accounting system and kind of merge it with the DSIP structure, if you will. But if you have your own additional cost information, you could put that in Volume 5 as well. The commercialization program in Volume 4 is pretty straightforward. There's specific directions in the solicitation and links to follow. That's not something that you have to necessarily gin up a whole separate briefing or anything for. That's something that the system can help you look up. And then in Volume 5 is a bit of a catch-all in terms of supporting documentation. There's a variety of required documents that you can see listed here. That's important. Not only to do these items ensure that we're abiding by all the statutory requirements, but it also ensures that that we have the adequate level of buy-in, whether that be from your Air Force technical points of contact and others, potentially like in the regulatory realm as well. You'll see a few as applicable offerings there as well that you can include as it pertains to your particular thing. All right, and then Volume 6 is pretty straightforward in terms of training. It's a screenshot of your completed certification there, so pretty low threat for Volume 6. All right, for the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the non-negotiables. This is an open topic, so we don't prioritize certain types of technology or technology markets. But there's a few, critical eligibility things that we needed to touch on here. First, all eligible offers must be a qualifying registered small business, right? So you have to have be registered with the SBA. You have to be registered in SAM, S-A-M. You need to have a DUNS number, cage code, that kind of thing. That's further detailed in the solicitation naturally, but it's an important first step that keeps us keeps us aligned with what we need to be doing. For phase 2, as we mentioned, maximum contract terms of 1.25 million and 21 months. So as you submit your proposal, we need to make sure that you understand that we should not see offerings for more than that unless you're bringing additional funds to the table. As we mentioned, all the proposals must be submitted via DSIP. There's a help desk function through DSIP that can help with a lot of the program specific questions. But ultimately, we're not able to take questions or kind of pre-read any proposals via email or that kind of thing. Everything has to flow through DSIP. In addition, these activities should be RDT&E. We're not procuring services. We're not just simple procuring hardware. We're not just buying your thing outright, right? We are developing capability based on the needs of the defense marketplace. So that's important to note as well. You have the fraud, waste, and abuse training, as we talked about. And without these things in place, without the required documentation that we talked about on the previous slide, we simply won't be in a place, we won't be able to evaluate, much less award the proposal, right? So it's just really important to make sure that we have some of the basics checked before we move forward. We get questions routinely about, what does a good proposal look like, right? As a great starting point, it has all of these boxes checked, okay? But in that same kind of line of thinking, we're gonna move to the next slide. And we're gonna talk about the evaluation criteria. So the great proposals don't simply, meet the baseline minimums, right? The great proposals are going to speak very clearly, very concisely to the evaluation criteria itself. These 3 things, A, B, and C here, are the only qualifying or the only qualitative judgments that are made on your proposal, right? All the things that we talked about, the required documentation, the non-negotiables on the previous slide, all of those things are baseline eligibility checkboxes. We have to have those in place to move forward, right? These 3 points here, the potential for government or private sector commercialization, the appropriateness, relevance, and specificity of an identified defense need, and the validity and feasibility of your technical approach, right? Those things are what are qualitatively evaluated and what your individual proposal will be ranked on. We could talk more about the specifics of this. This is a direct quote from the solicitation. Again, the link there is at the bottom if you're curious. Obviously, we advocate reading the entire document, but this is a particularly interesting and critical piece of that document. But no, again, this is the only thing that is judged qualitatively, right? We pull in expertise from across the Air Force and Space Force to make sure that relevant people are reading your proposal. And that at the end of the day, the best proposals with the most feasibility, the most direct impact to the Air Force are being selected. All right, so we'll go to the next slide here. So what's next, right? We had our initial AMA back on Thursday, the 2nd of December. Today's the 16th of December, right? So we're taking care of AMA number 2 today. And we have another scheduled for the 13th of January, where we're going to talk about something very, talk about things in very similar terms as we get closer to that proposal window opening on the 12th of January, which is exciting. At the end of the day, all the proposals are going to be due on Thursday, the 10th of February at noon Eastern. You'll hear us say this over and over again. Please do not wait till the last minute. We do not own DSIP. We cannot control when the system updates happen, we don't always know about them ourselves, right? So if you have the opportunity to not wait until the last minute, we always advocate for please taking advantage of that, right, and getting your information in early. We'll have, well, first of all, you have the registrations here at our weekly webinar series website, where you'll also be able to kind of see recordings of this, see the documentation, and review what we're talking about today. I believe that moves us into the question and answer portion of our program. One of the first things I wanted to talk about, and I think we'll probably talk about this a bit more as well, is customer acquisition, particularly as it pertains to this direct to phase 2. So as we talked about, this direct to phase 2 requires a signed customer memorandum. What that means is you should have already have had conversations with your national security counterparts in the Department of the Air Force or otherwise, and have that document ready to go and submitted as part of your proposal. For folks who have not worked in the defense space, that can be a challenging thing. So there's a variety of resources that we provide to help folks line up and find those, identify those resources. First of all, there's a bevy of websites that talk through AFRL tech directorates that talk about, that those are organizationally owned by many different people, many different organizations across the Department of the Air Force. There's always that as a general reference. But one thing I want to highlight are our focus areas. When we have questions from program executive officers who are, the folks who drive our broader acquisition ecosystem from within the Air Force, we point them towards these focus areas, right? So we have there's a variety of focus areas that are even currently out there who have program executive officer support, who are developing out specific pathways specifically for people in this program to move forward. Right now, we have acquisition experts, we have operational experts working with the F-22 program and looking to integrate small businesses and their solutions into the F-22 airframe and the F-22 ecosystem, as an example, right? Where they have aligned an internal strategy of bringing folks on board, managing them directly with that program office, and moving out in integration pathways into TACFI and STRATFI and beyond, right? That is an example of a lot of the work and the incredible engagement that the team has been able to facilitate on the Air Force side, on the government side, as we continue to grow this ecosystem, not only external to the government, right, and distributing this information externally, but really facilitating the engagement with our internal government partners to make sure that this program, this opportunity is the most value added possible for those of you in industry who are looking to work with us, right? We don't want to be dragging you and kind of pulling you into the program only to be met by a brick wall of folks who aren't interested in working with these small businesses, right? We spend most of our time engaging with the defense sector and making sure that they understand at a very baseline level how to work with you and how to take advantage of the program and how to integrate you into operations, right? And we've been the beneficiaries of a ton of great work, and the capability that you're bringing to bear through these programs are really speaking to the incredible opportunities that these programs exude, right? So that's really important. But with that, I'll pass it over to Helena and the team if there are other specific questions that we want to jump into and go from there.
All right. Thank you so much, Jared. Okay. So just to reiterate, if you have questions, please make sure that they are going into that Q&A chat box. I want to make sure that we're not missing any questions if they're just being entered into chat. So please do that so we can help you to get those answers better. I'm going to try really hard to group some of these questions together because we've got a really engaged, awesome audience today with a lot of questions. So I'm going to try to keep this straightforward. And also please know that if you have really specific questions about your proposal, please be sure to reach out on a different time because we don't want to give away any information about your specific proposal or technology area. So first question first. About this particular solicitation, you mentioned that this is an open topic. Can you get a little bit more detail about open versus specific and maybe provide some information for the folks in attendance, which one might be a better fit based on their tech?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So the open topic is just one of the offerings that the Air Force provides as part of this SBIR and SITR program. So when you go onto the website there and you look at the variety of different solicitations that are available, you're going to see an open topic with that open topic number that I showed a little earlier. We can probably show that again just to make sure people are tracking that. But you're also going to see a variety of other Air Force offerings that we term specific topics, right? And these specific topics are sponsored by Air Force organizations within the acquisition community specifically, that are looking for answers to specific questions, if you will, right? They're looking for specific capabilities in specific areas that they know they need and are, they think are well suited for the small business space. The open topic, in contrast, does not have a specific need set that we're going after. It really is an open front door for folks to come in and work with the Air Force, work with AFWERX as they develop out their trajectory with their Air Force counterparts. What that means is in the specific topics, they're going to say, hey, we're looking for X, Y, and Z, right? We're looking for these capabilities. We need you to be able to do these things, right? And help us answer this specific question. The open topic does not have that, right? We say, hey, if you want to work with the Air Force, if you think you have a solution that has customers inside of the Defense Department, we want to see you. We want to work with you and develop that and scale that with those customers, right? And so you don't have to wait for us on the open topic side. You don't have to wait for us to ask for what you're doing, right? So they're complementary. There's some things that we know and there's some things we don't know, right? From an organizational standpoint. And this is an opportunity for you to help us understand what you bring to the table, right? And establish that trajectory within the Air Force without us having to know that you exist, and that without us having to put out a solicitation directly for you specifically.
What about some of the more must-haves parts of the application? There's a specific component in there that requires something that is explicitly innovative, right? Can you dig in a little bit more just so we can better understand what is that RDT specification?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about things being innovative or things being RDT&E, right? The point that we're trying to get to is that that we realize that our government customers, in many cases, have, in most cases, really, they have a specific application or use case, right? Where you may have a commercial product that is available to a certain, commercial market sector that is still that product or solution is going to be applicable to the Defense Department, but maybe not quite in its current state, right? It needs to be developed in some way. It needs to get some kind of certifications. It needs to be tested to a certain degree. It needs to be, developed in some way, shape, or form. And what this program allows us to do is, one, not only help you secure that market sector inside the Defense Department, but it also supplies funding to allow you to make those modifications and apply your commercial solution to the national defense solution set as well, right? Allow you to research and develop or apply test and evaluation to your solution to best apply that and offer that to our Air Force customers, such that they can then be part of your larger customer market.
Great. What about so digging more into those government customers? We've had a lot of questions about when folks are actually getting the MOU, right? So first things first, what are the resources that are available to an applicant as they're going out and finding a government customer? And then what's the difference between the end user and the customer?
Yeah, great questions. So a couple of basics. In the past, we have put out the customer memorandum template with the actual solicitation, right, as an attachment. What we've actually started to do is list the most current customer memorandum template on the website, right? And you'll notice that it has 750K on that template, right? And that comes back to it being a template. So for this particular offering, right, the maximum is 1.25 million of program funds. And so you can know based on the solicitation that will adjust. You'll notice that there's a few things in there that are kind of clear template language that you'll have to work with your Air Force customer on. But ultimately, you're going to have a customer, which is a kind of an acquisition function, and you're having an end user, right? And so a simple example of when we talk about these two different roles is that F-15 pilots don't buy the planes that they fly, right? And so that highlights the idea that there's people who actually use your thing, right? Your solution, your product. They're the guys actually, holding the stick and driving it, or they're employing your solution in some way, shape, or form. And generally speaking, depending on the application of your particular solution, there's going to be a different set of people who are in charge of actually equipping those end users, actually acquiring the system, actually being the customer in our language for that solution. So there's going to be an acquisition authority of some kind, an organization who is in charge of that kind of thing. And in order for us to transition your capability most effectively, we've found over time and experience that it's really critically important to have both those people on board, right? Not only do we need the user saying, hey, this is useful, this is something that makes my life better, that makes my mission easier or more effective, but we also need the customers. We need those acquisition folks to actually be tied in and make sure that we're applying that acquisition goodness, if you will, to the relationship, right? Because they're the experts in actually bringing this to market, implementing it with those end users, and making sure that all of the systems work together as they're supposed to. So we want to make sure that both of those parties are part of these discussions and ultimately part of the effort via that customer memorandum.
So, okay, so that customer memorandum, Air Force customers, right? What about those that have potential interest from joint contracting authorities? Is that something that counts as a legitimate customer in this case?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. So at the end of the day, right, these programs are being funded through Air Force dollars. And what that means in government speak is that these funds have been appropriated for Air Force use against Air Force problems, right, if you will. And we have to make sure as program management staff that we are solving Air Force problems through this program. Now, the open topic is built in part on the idea that our problems are not unique, right, to a vast scale. And so we totally expect that the solutions being offered through here, through these programs, have opportunities with the other services and across the federal government, right? And so what needs to happen in that particular case is that the technical point of contact that's assigned as part of the customer memorandum, right, needs to be a Department of the Air Force employee, period, dot. Right. In the case where that technical point of contact, that TPOC, that DAF employee does not work in a Department of the Air Force organization, maybe they work in a joint organization, or maybe they work in an organization that's not in the Department of Defense, right? So there's Air Force people working at the FAA. There's Air Force people working at NASA. There's Air Force people working across the intelligence space, right? If you work in one of these areas that isn't the Department of the Air Force, the signatories on that customer memorandum may be different. They may be from other services, right? But the technical point of contact that's being assigned, that's being delegated down to, is their Air Force representative, right? And that allows us to make sure that that we are solving Air Force problems through this program. So there's a little bit of nuance, but we want to start with that idea of solving Air Force problems and not misappropriating the funds that have been given to us by Congress. And so that's how we do that. Generally speaking, just statistically speaking, with the number of folks that we have in Air Force organizations versus not, there's going to be an Air Force signatory, or the signatories on the document are going to all be Air Force with an Air Force technical point of contact. But in the case where there's a joint organization or something similar to what I described before, you may have a joint representative who's not a Department of the Air Force employee sign the document, and then delegate down to an Air Force employee inside of their organization. So happy to kind of talk more about that as we need to.
Great. So in regards to pushing a little bit more on that government customer and the way that we evaluate those things, how, obviously the MOU is a non-negotiable, right? You have to have that signed in order to get your phase 2. How does the AFWERX evaluator weigh something like previous government traction? So say someone has won like an AFWERX challenge, or they've won funding from some other group that might not necessarily be Air Force, but something applicable to a different agency, or you know what I'm saying? Or like if they get a letter of support from someone that's not explicitly the MOU signer, how do we weigh those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So, that stuff is super useful. It's great context for your proposal. We do not consider past performance as like from an acquisition standpoint. That's not like an evaluation criteria, for instance. But it can, the idea that you have, been successful in the commercial space, you've been successful in the government space in a variety of different ways and different, with different folks, all speaks to the evaluation criteria, right? So maybe you won a NASA challenge, or, they worked, you have a product that's already successful in the commercial space, right? That's going to talk directly to your commercialization potential, right? Hey, we have a broad customer base already established, right? That helps that scoring and that evaluation. When you talk about defense need, right? If you have already been invested in by our basic research enterprise, if you have already worked directly with a variety of users and have established defense need, you can talk to that, right? You can bring letters of support from a variety of different places to help us better understand the depth at which you have a commercialization potential, the depth at which you have an identified defense need, the depth of the feasibility of your technical approach. You can talk, directly and overtly to those things all through your proposal, whether it be from separate documentation like a letter of support to what is discussed in your actual technical volume as well.
Great. What about, okay, so we've spoken about the government side and the sort of defense need. On the other side of the house, when we're looking at this from a commercialization perspective, is there a specific sort of benchmark that evaluators like to see in terms for commercialization potential? Or is there some kind of trigger that allows evaluators to believe that there is commercialization potential, even if the previous history is predominantly government and defense focused?
Sure. Ultimately, we want to see that there is a broad set of people who care about what you're doing, right? And that's almost an overly simplistic way of thinking about it. But the point we're trying to get across is that, with these dual use products, which is what these programs are focused on, right? Where there's a commercial market and a defense market, the point of kind of the economic case for these programs and that focus is really one of cost sharing, right? And so we don't want to put ourselves in a position where the Air Force is holding up your business, right? The Air Force is holding up a particular product or solution, not only because that can be a really tough road to hoe from a company's perspective, right? The government can be unreliable in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places. We're trying to change that, but that's still a reality in many different ways. But at the end of the day, from an Air Force perspective, those things are also, not only unique, but particularly expensive, not only to acquire, but to maintain as well. And so as we try to bring in these dual use technologies, the intent, just at a macroeconomic level, is that we are cost sharing. We're sharing the cost as well as the impact of the development and of the actual implementation of that. So we want to be your customer. We don't want to be your only customer, right? And so from a commercialization potential standpoint, you can talk about a variety of different metrics, a variety of different kind of ways of that you have traction across the commercial or government space. And some of those will be kind of market specific, right? Digital products or, demonstrating traction for a digital product is going to be a lot different than demonstrating, traction for a piece of hardware or other research that's being done. You don't have to have sales to be successful in this program, but it's an easy metric, right? People, it's an easy way of demonstrating, market potential and traction to this point. So you don't have to have commercial sales, but that's an easy way to talk to the level of magnitude that you provide and the value that you provide as a company.
And just a point of clarification before we move on to more private sector stuff. When we say Department of the Air Force, we're also talking about Air Force and Space Force. That is under one umbrella. So can we safely assume that if a customer is someone within Space Force, that's all cleared for the MOU qualifications?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, the Department of the Air Force, as you mentioned, includes both services equally, right? So we have a large and growing contingent of SpaceWorks employees, not only in AFWERX, but working on this program specifically. So we are very well tied in to the acquisition and operations aspects of the new Space Force, as well as the Air Force side of the house. Great.
Okay, shifting back to private sector and industry. I don't think it's specifically outlined in this one, but we've had questions about private investment. It doesn't look like it's a requirement, but are proposals evaluated differently if there is private funding on board? And how does fund matching play, if at all, into this upcoming cycle?
Sure. I mean, so, people spending money, whether it be sales or investment, it speaks directly to the evaluation criteria, right? So it is an easy, quantifiably, and clearly understood way of saying, hey, I care about this, right? So it is positively received by evaluators, specifically when it comes to the commercialization potential aspect. But it is not a requirement in any way, shape, or form, right? So a majority of the folks who come through our doors do not have, private investment dollars attached to their effort, and that's perfectly okay, right? They're able to secure contracts at higher rates, just the same. So there's a lot of opportunity here. There's no requirement for cost sharing to be brought, but it is a positive, right? So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying it's a positive, but not a negative if you don't have it.
All right. So regarding, I want to bring it back to this specific upcoming cycle so people can ask a little bit more technical questions here. We have a question that's wondering, okay, so let me just read this first. So direct to phase 2 awards were designed for small business concerns that completed phase 1 milestones using non-SIPR funds. That includes customer discovery. What are the technical specifics for D2P2 and for folks that are starting with a phase 1 or those that do not have them? Is there any specific things that folks should know if they're considering, going after the cycle, or if they should wait until a phase 1 opens up in terms of those technical requirements?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so ultimately, this direct to phase 2 is an express lane, right? To jump into the program, go directly into a phase 2, right? As the name implies. What that means is that they already have to have this feasibility stuff done, right? Which is really what we were trying to achieve in phase 1, right? It's going to be, this is historically our most competitive offering, this direct to phase 2. But what we're trying to do here is, again, be able to focus and get these executed in a very short amount of time and get meet our obligations from a program perspective, and be more responsive to industry along the way. What we try to do through these programs is be a reliable partner, right? And so for those of the companies and industry partners out there who have an idea of who their customers are and how to solve the problems that they're experiencing, this is one of the ideal ways of kind of jumping in directly with those customers, right? And start to get to a point where you're bending metal, directly. With our phase one, people kind of underestimate the usefulness of phase one. So we have folks who they may come in the door and already have a customer secured, but they're not quite sure of like what that phase two really needs to look like, right? They're not quite sure of all the regulatory hurdles that they're going to encounter that need to be part of that planning, right? And so phase one offers a bit of a buffer, right? It's only 3 months long, but it's still a bit of a buffer to help provide a little bit more runway to understand those needs to a deeper level. But there's lots of companies who don't need that, right? They know what their problem is, they know what their answer should be, they know how to get there from here, and they're ready to jump right in, right? And this is where that direct to phase two comes into play most clearly.
Great. What about, I'm thinking about number of proposals and awards. Is it possible for someone to submit more than one proposal, and can a company be awarded more than one contract? What does that look like?
Yeah, fantastic question. So long story short is yes, you can, right? Not only can you submit more than one proposal, you can be awarded more than one proposal. There is one kind of golden rule when it comes to this, which is they cannot be for the same work, right? So you can offer multiple proposals, but they can't be for the same thing or the same activities, right? They have to be separate and distinct. It is in your best interest from the government perspective, is in your best interest to help us understand how those things are different, right? So if you decide to submit 2 proposals, in both of those proposals say, I've submitted multiple, right? These things are different in these very clear and distinct and easily understandable ways, right? Because it's going to be something that we're very eagerly tracking. The government is not into paying for things twice. And so this is one way where we kind of help ourselves not do that. So you are able to submit as many proposals as you would like, per company or what have you, but you just need to make very clear how those efforts are different and how the activities that are being proposed are separate and distinct from the other efforts that you've put into the system there.
What about, we have a question here. I know we're running short on time, so I'm trying to combine some of these. So there's a question specifically about subcontractors and government facilities that they work with. Sure. Do those also have to be US only entities, or can other folks from, say, allied country academic research institutions go with you on that project? And then related sort of, in regards to things like hardware, are there any limitations or concerns around hardware, commercial off-the-shelf tech that is built in adversarial countries? What are the concerns around, non-US entities, hardware collaborators, et cetera?
Sure, yeah, so a couple different areas there. One is that there are statutory limitations on who qualifies for these programs, and what efforts qualify for these programs, specifically as it pertains to ownership, right? So you have to be at least 51% owned, US owned. The work being done has to be done in the US as well, right? So that's part of that. That's both prime and subcontractors, right? So that's really critical. Another aspect of this is the actual technology that you're working on, whatever it may be, right? You start getting into international trade agreement regulations, right? So ITAR. So depending on what you're doing and who you're doing it with, right? ITAR could come into play, and that would affect who can participate in the program, specifically as it comes to nationality and that type of thing. Additionally, if maybe this is obvious, but if you have any types of classification questions, or you have users or customers who want to move your effort to a higher classification, right? That would certainly come into play as well, right, with the technology and the development opportunities. If you have a subcontractor, who has like foreign nationals working for them, right, we'll have to kind of work through this with you, right? And this is part of the proposal documentation as well, is declaring those individuals and really clarifying what activities they're going to be working on specifically. So that ties in a little bit to the classification. It ties a little bit into the type of solution, type of technology that you're utilizing. But from a large, high level, the work, the offer, right, the prime contractor has to be at least 51% US owned, and all of the work has to be done in the US as well. So there's a couple big rocks, and then it gets a little bit more gray and application specific once you kind of get into the weeds a little bit.
Okay, 5 minutes left. So I'm trying to do rapid fire and cover the things that are of most general importance. Getting to phase 3 and transition. What do people know? What do people need to know in order to prepare for that? And is there anything that they should be doing now to better set themselves up for that success?
Sure. So, I mean, we're focused on transition, and phase 3 is transition, right, in our eyes. What that means, a phase 3 has nothing to do with AFWERX, if you will, right? And if a phase 3 contract is a customer funded and executed contract, right? It is not a contract through AFWERX. It is built upon this program and allows them to work with you more directly and more quickly, and to get you on contract faster. But ultimately, it is executed by their contracting office and with their money completely. So part of the reason why we have them come to this point in the process and be integrated here and now in phase 2 is that one, so that they're involved. 2, that they actually have an intimate understanding and an intimate relationship with you all as industry, so that they can really understand what's being developed and why, and how it can provide value to their operations, right? So that you get to the point of being in TACFI or StratFi and scaling, or you can go directly into a phase 3 with them, right? So, your government customer who's working with you here in phase 2 can move directly into a phase 3 at any point in the process, based on what they've seen and the capabilities that you can provide to them. So we are all about kind of connecting you with those government folks and providing you the avenue to work with them most directly, such that they can then move you forward into their operations and into their budgetary cycle, so that you have an established relationship with folks inside the Air Force and providing capability regularly to them and their communities.
All right, super helpful. So with that, we only have 3 minutes left. So I'd like to use this opportunity just to wrap up and finish out any specific questions about what happens next. So we're currently in pre-release, right? Once pre-release ends and the application period opens, no more communication with us, correct? That's when the actual templates, guidance, all that information will go live on the website, correct? For everyone to go through with the updated templates, MOUs, et cetera.
So all the documentation is there now, right? So they can access the customer memorandums, they can access the solicitation, they can read all the documentation, right? And just as an aside, right, the solicitation is king. So if you read something in there and it says, well, Jared said it was blue and this says it was red, the answer is it's red, right? The solicitation document is the authoritative source of information. So please make sure you keep that in mind. But the solicitation is available. Customer memorandum template is available. When we move out of pre-solicitation and into the actual proposal window, as you mentioned, the communication with individual companies will cease, right? So we won't talk to you individually, but we will have, like our AMA, for instance, where we'll talk in a public forum and allow everyone to have that same level of information. We're very particular about giving people, unfair advantages through this program. So once we get to this list, the actual proposal window opening, we will cease communication with individual companies.
Copy. So once people submit, once that window closes, what comes next in terms of answering for that solicitation? Is there a certain timeline that folks should anticipate to hear back? Who should they reach out to with questions regarding that? And then what if they are select funded? What's the process of contract award?
Yeah, great question. So the proposal window will close on the, I don't know, what was that, 10th of February? It's a Thursday at noon Eastern. That afternoon, your government team is going to be downloading proposals. We're going to be starting the proposal assignment, the evaluator assignment process. We get kicked off immediately. So in those next few weeks, your proposals get evaluated. They go through a variety of reviews and due diligence steps from our teams, our technical teams, our finance teams, our contracting teams. Roughly 45 days, 45 to 60 days, you're going to see a select or non-select notification come through the system, right? With opportunities for feedback and that kind of thing as well. And somewhere between 60 and 75 days, notionally speaking, we have our actual contracting sprint itself. So that's the point at which contracting staff reaches out to you as a select and says, hey, we have these questions, or hey, we don't, right? They'll introduce themselves. If there's any questions or negotiations or clarifications that they need from a contracting perspective, they'll reach out individually for those. And then they'll move towards actual contract award. So in that time frame, that's when you start engaging with the contracting staff, you can expect contract award to be moving pretty soon after that, within a week or two, generally speaking. But the specifics you can discuss with the contracting staff when they reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jared. I'm so sorry for asking you all these questions. Your voice sounds like it's going, but we got through it. We're at the end. You did a great job. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. And thank you everyone also for dialing in today. If your specific question did not get answered, please be sure to follow up on our AF Cyber Sitter page for a full listing of all the questions. So hopefully we can get back to you around your specific question. This is it for the webinars for 2021. We are off 23 December and 30 December in observance of the holidays. And then we will be back 6 January talking about success stories and finding opportunities with the Department of the Air Force. So thank you everyone again for joining us. We're really looking forward to seeing you all again in the new year and hope you have a happy, safe, healthy holiday season. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, team.
Bye, y'all.